What should you do if your neighbor decides that your pool is actually hers? And what if her audacity turns into complete chaos? This is a story about standing up for personal boundaries where justice prevails. Ready to find out just how far a neighbor's outrageous behavior can go? Then stay tuned. Life in a quiet suburb seemed perfect for Jack. He had just finished building a large pool in his backyard, a reward for years of hard work. On hot summer days, he enjoyed relaxing by the water, inviting friends and family over for barbecues, and reveling in his solitude. He loved spending evenings watching the sunsets and taking in the pleasant scent of freshly cut grass. To him, this house was more than just property. It was a sanctuary from the chaos of the world. But his peaceful idyll was soon disrupted by an unexpected visit. One morning, he heard a persistent knock at the door. Opening it slightly, he saw his neighbor, Karen, a middle-aged woman, always impeccably dressed and with an air of superiority. She was known for her need to control everything around her. "Good morning, Jack," she began with a forced smile, crossing her arms. "I think it would be fair if you let my kids and me use your pool. It's for the community, you understand?" Jack frowned, slightly taken aback by such audacity. "Karen," he started slowly, "this is private property. I built the pool for myself and my family. If you want a pool, you can build your own." Her smile vanished instantly, and her eyes flashed with cold fire. "Well, that's not very neighborly," she said through clenched teeth. "I've spoken to other neighbors, and they think you should share. It wouldn't be that hard." Jack sighed, realizing the conversation was taking an unpleasant turn. He tried to stay calm, but Karen's manipulative tone irritated him. "I appreciate that you and the neighbors like my pool, but this is my yard, my water, and my hard work," he said firmly. "You can't just show up and demand to use it." Karen narrowed her eyes, her tone becoming sharper. "Are you sure you want to behave this way? We live in a community where we take care of each other. You don't want to ruin relationships." Jack met her gaze and, unwilling to continue the pointless argument, simply said, "Karen, this conversation is over. Have a good day." He shut the door but felt a lingering unease. Deep down, he knew Karen wouldn't give up that easily, and he had no idea just how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. The next day, returning home from work, Jack immediately sensed something was wrong. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw several kids splashing happily in his pool while Karen lounged in one of his chairs, sipping lemonade. The sight filled him with irritation and disbelief. It was as if his own backyard no longer belonged to him. He slammed on the brakes, got out of the car, and marched toward the unwelcome guests. The kids froze when they saw him, but Karen didn't even bother to get up. She sat there with an air of entitlement, as if she were in her own home. Jack demanded that they leave immediately. The children hesitantly climbed out of the pool while Karen, clearly annoyed, got up from the lounge chair. She made no effort to leave quickly, openly defying Jack's authority over his own property. After a tense exchange in which Karen tried to paint Jack as greedy and unfriendly, he realized that reasoning with her wouldn't be enough. He took out his phone and called the police to report trespassing. When the officers arrived, Karen attempted to twist the situation in her favor, claiming that Jack was being aggressive and unreasonable. However, after reviewing the property documents, the police confirmed his right to enforce his boundaries and ordered Karen and her children to leave immediately. Karen shot Jack a venomous glare before leaving, but her expression carried a clear message. This wasn't over. That evening, Jack installed additional security cameras, checked the locks, and warned a few neighbors about what had happened. Some supported him, while others preferred to stay out of it, but Jack could feel it. This was just the beginning of a bigger problem. His fears were confirmed the next morning. Stepping into his backyard, he found his pool filled with trash. Plastic bottles, garbage bags, and other debris floated on the water's surface, turning his carefully maintained retreat into a mess. Jack clenched his fists, realizing Karen wasn't backing down. This was no longer just a neighborly dispute. It was all-out war for his right to his own space. Jack wasn't about to let this go unanswered. The first thing he did was check the security camera footage from the night before. His suspicions were confirmed. Karen had snuck over to his fence under the cover of darkness, carrying bags of trash, and had deliberately dumped them into his pool. Her actions were calculated, and they only strengthened Jack's resolve to fight back. He saved the footage and headed straight to the police. The officers carefully reviewed the evidence and informed him that he had every right to file a complaint for property damage. They assured him they would visit Karen and warn her about the potential consequences if she continued her behavior. That evening, a police patrol pulled up in front of Jack's house. Karen must have anticipated their visit because she was already standing on her porch with a composed expression. She greeted the officers with feigned surprise and immediately denied any involvement. But when they showed her the footage from the security cameras, her face changed. At first, she tried to downplay it, claiming she had merely thrown away some trash and that the wind had supposedly carried it into Jack's pool. But when the police didn't buy her excuses, she changed tactics, accusing Jack of spying on her and invading her privacy. Jack watched the exchange in silence, letting the officers handle it. Ultimately, they issued a formal warning. If this happened again, she could face a fine or even arrest for intentional property damage. They also advised Jack to file an official lawsuit if he wanted to seek compensation. But Karen had no intention of backing down. The next morning, Jack found an anonymous note left on his doorstep. It had no signature, but the tone made it obvious who had written it. The message was a veiled threat, warning him that if he didn't stop his attacks, he would soon have real problems. It was now clear that Karen was willing to escalate further. Jack knew it was time to go on the offensive. He contacted a lawyer to discuss his legal options and prepared an official police report. He wasn't about to be bullied into submission. He was ready to fight back. Jack knew Karen wouldn't stop unless he took decisive action. He gathered all the evidence, security footage, police reports, and the threatening note, and handed it over to his lawyer. His attorney immediately filed a lawsuit against Karen for trespassing, property damage, and harassment. A few days later, Karen received an official court summons. The entire neighborhood started buzzing about the upcoming legal battle. Even the most neutral neighbors began taking sides. Many had long considered Karen a nuisance, but no one had dared to stand up to her before. Now, seeing Jack fight back, they started supporting him. In the lead-up to the trial, Karen tried rallying her allies from the HOA, hoping to turn public opinion against Jack. She spread rumors, accusing him of aggression, disrespect toward neighbors, and even faking the security footage. But her smear campaign backfired. The more she tried to play the victim, the more people saw through her manipulations and distanced themselves from her. On the day of the hearing, Karen walked into the courtroom with forced confidence, but the tension in her expression betrayed her nerves. She attempted to paint herself as a well-meaning neighbor who only wanted to foster a sense of community, but was unfairly targeted. She claimed her actions were merely harmless retaliation for Jack's rudeness. But the evidence spoke for itself. The security footage clearly showed her trespassing, damaging property, and acting aggressively. Neighbors who had previously feared her wrath now testified against her, confirming her long history of boundary violations and manipulative behavior. The judge showed no sympathy. A restraining order was issued, prohibiting Karen from coming within 50 meters of Jack's house. She was also ordered to pay for the cost of cleaning the pool and replacing any damaged equipment. Jack's lawyer pushed for additional damages for the harassment and threats, which the judge granted. As the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Karen stood there, stunned, unable to believe how quickly and completely she had been defeated. Her schemes, manipulations, and intimidation tactics had all failed. She left the courthouse pale and humiliated, her reputation in the neighborhood completely destroyed. But even after his legal victory, Jack remained cautious. He upgraded his home security, reinforced his surveillance system, and maintained close communication with his neighbors to ensure Karen didn't attempt any final act of revenge. A few weeks later, he heard the news. Karen had put her house up for sale. She must have realized that she had lost all control over the community and chose to leave in disgrace. On the day she moved out, neighbors stood watching as movers carried her belongings away. Some openly expressed their relief, glad to see her go. No one came to say goodbye. It was clear. Karen had lost. Finally, Jack could breathe easy again. He had not only defended his home, but had also shown the entire community that no one had the right to trample over someone else's boundaries. His fight had ended in a well-earned victory, and once again, his home and pool became a place of peace and solitude, just as he had intended from the start. Justice had prevailed. With Karen gone, the neighborhood felt transformed. The tension she had created finally dissipated, and residents could live more peacefully. There were no more baseless complaints, ridiculous HOA fines, or constant conflicts fueled by her manipulations. However, Jack wasn't ready to fully relax just yet. He knew that restoring normalcy would take time. The first thing he did was restore his backyard. Thanks to Karen, he had to spend a significant amount on cleaning the pool, replacing furniture, and upgrading his security system. He carefully inspected his surveillance setup, ensuring every corner of his property was now under watch. He wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance now started to show more friendliness. Some admitted they had tolerated Karen's antics for years, but had been too afraid to stand up to her. Now that she was gone, they were eager to help. One neighbor assisted with repairing Jack's fence, while another helped install additional outdoor lighting. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he was part of a community where people truly supported each other. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood began to thrive again. Kids played freely outside, neighbors held more frequent barbecues, and the HOA, now free from Karen's influence, finally started working for the residents. They revised several controversial rules that Karen had implemented and made them fairer. One morning, Jack woke up to a knock on the door. When he opened it, he was greeted by an elderly woman with a warm smile. She introduced herself as Margaret, the new owner of Karen's former house. A retired university professor, she had moved to the neighborhood seeking peace and quiet. Unlike her predecessor, she made it clear that she had no intention of meddling in anyone's affairs. Instead of making demands about sharing the pool, she simply offered Jack a homemade pie as a gesture of goodwill. Jack invited her in for coffee, and they spent time chatting about life in the neighborhood. At that moment, he realized how much had changed since Karen's departure. Where there was once chaos and hostility, there was now peace and kindness. His long and difficult battle for his rights was finally over. Jack understood that sometimes you have to stand up to injustice to reclaim your comfort and security. He had learned to appreciate his independence and recognized that there would always be people willing to support fairness. Now his home was once again the safe haven it was meant to be, his personal sanctuary, free from unwanted intrusions and manipulations. Most importantly, he knew that no one would ever challenge his right to privacy again. Months passed since Karen had left the neighborhood. Life gradually returned to normal, and Jack finally felt like he could breathe freely. His home was once again a place of peace, and his pool was his private retreat, free from the fear that someone might trespass without permission. However, this period wasn't just about relaxation. It was also a time of reflection. The conflict with Karen had changed his perspective on many things. He became more involved with his neighbors and attended HOA meetings more frequently. Previously, he had seen the Homeowners Association as just another bureaucratic entity, but now he realized that its effectiveness depended on resident participation. Without Karen's influence, The HOA became more transparent, and new resident-approved policies made life easier for everyone. Neighbors no longer felt like they were at the mercy of one person's whims. One of the greatest outcomes was the newfound sense of mutual respect in the neighborhood. Where there was once division and resentment, there was now a willingness to help each other. Residents started organizing community cleanups, lending tools, and hosting social gatherings. This new way of life made Jack realize that his fight for justice had impacted not just him, but the entire community. One evening, while enjoying the warm weather by his pool, he heard a familiar knock at the door. It was Margaret, his new neighbor. She had brought a bottle of homemade lemonade and invited him to a neighborhood gathering happening nearby. Jack smiled, realizing that he had truly become part of something bigger. The evening was filled with laughter, shared stories, and discussions about the future of the community. While his conflict with Karen had been exhausting, he understood now that it had led to positive changes. He had learned to stand his ground, but he had also discovered the importance of good neighbors. Sometimes, a single conflict could serve as a catalyst for lasting improvement. As he returned home that night, he gazed up at the starry sky and felt an overwhelming sense of calm. His life was once again his own, and no one could dictate how he should live. His home, his pool, his neighborhood, they were all now part of his new reality, one free from unnecessary conflicts and chaos. Jack smiled. A new, peaceful chapter of his life had begun.